Mr. Speaker, welcome.
Thank you, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing great. Glad to have you. Session's moving along, and are you pleased with the session 2012 so far?
Very much so. I think, my emphasis has been, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, the biggies, the budget and redistricting, which are tremendous, huge tasks. But we're on track. Really by halftime, we're done with both, and that's a big deal. I'm pretty excited.
As you went into the 2012 legislative session, what were your personal goals as Speaker?
I'd say two things. One, focus on the main things. Focus on the two constitutional duties we have of dealing with the budget and dealing with the redistricting. And then as a sort of underlying goal, empower the members to drive the agenda. Last year, I made a conscious choice in the first session, the 2011 session, to really push some specific policy objectives in areas like Medicaid and growth management and other things. And wonderfully, we got them accomplished. And so this session, both because we have two behemoth main tasks to focus on and because it's an election year, I shifted the focus now towards really empowering the members to help drive that agenda on the policy side while I focus my efforts on the two big ones.
It's amazing. The session is moved forward 2 months roughly to deal with redistricting, and you've got to deal with another tough budget. But in the House especially, the redistricting process seems to be moving along as it is in the Senate, but it's moving along very rapidly in the House. You've already voted out a plan. And how did it happen to move along as quickly and seemingly transparently as it did?
Well, we were quick and transparent. We started early, and I got to say a huge word of compliment to the chairman of redistricting in the House, Will Weatherford. He's our speaker designate. He'll become speaker after me. And I gave him one charge. I said, just follow the law. And redistricting is very complicated. You've got federal law, state law, in the Constitution, you have the Federal Voting Rights Act, and be open about it. And literally, this was the most open and transparent process by a factor of 1,000%. I think initially, or by the time they started on the maps in 2002, the last time this happened, they had received four maps from the public. We received 177 maps from the public, heard from over 5,000 people. And we did it out in the open, and we really put principle over politics. I was proud of the House when we passed the maps because it literally, members voted on maps that would personally either inconvenience or perhaps end their political careers. It had members, over a third of the members drawn into the same district or maybe not living in the district for which they currently served. But they did it because we all took an oath to uphold the Constitution. And it was not only a victory, I think, for the House and how we went about it, but it was a victory of the Constitution and principle over politics. And I was really proud.
Democrats would say, there are more Democrats in Florida than there are Republicans. And yet there are going to be, it looks like, more seats that will be taken by Republicans than Democrats. How can that be? And what would be your answer to that?
I would say that they are arguing for the one thing that is prohibited by the law, which is a results-based map. What was so humorous to me is there's one district in Florida that I guarantee you was not drawn with the intent to favor or disfavor an incumbent, not drawn to favor or disfavor a political party, not drawn with any political consideration whatsoever. It's called the statewide race, okay? Florida, the entire statewide race, has 4 cabinet officials. 100% of them are Republican, okay? So if we were going to use that argument, we should argue that every seat should be drawn in the State House and Senate to elect Republicans because in the statewide race, it elected unanimously 4 out of 4 Republicans. Their logic is flawed. They're arguing for the one thing that is literally prohibited by the own amendment that they supported, and that is a results-based map drawing. We drew the maps compactly, contiguously, followed city and county boundaries, and did what the Constitution said. It didn't favor or disfavor anyone. We did it right, and we'll let the chips fall where they may. I think they're worried that the chips may not fall where they like, and so now they're trying to inject or claim some flaw in the process, which just rings hollow to me.
We know by law that the redistricting plans will come under review, congressional and state legislative. Give us a quick preview of what will occur.
Well, on the state House and Senate maps, there's in the Florida Constitution an automatic review by the state Supreme Court. Because we've gotten those to the courts early enough, they have a 30-day review period, then it comes back. We get one more chance to make modifications if the court finds fault, and I'm cautiously optimistic they may not find fault with them. But if they do, we've got plenty of time to do an extraordinary special session like the Constitution says and get them done in time for the elections. On the federal side, the Department of Justice will review the congressional maps. Certainly somebody could file a lawsuit. But I think the good news is I think the Department of Justice and the federal courts, as well as the state Supreme Court and the calendar, recognize the need to get this done in time for the election so we don't have ambiguity running into an election. And I'm pretty optimistic there's plenty of time to do that.
Let's talk about the other big bill that has to pass, the budget. You've faced 5, 6, 7 years of tough budget cuts. You had to come back and do some more. And the House has already voted out a budget. What were your priorities as Speaker in the budgeting process? What were you trying to accomplish?
Well, at the macro level, the preparation of the state budget is just like moms and dads sitting around the dinner table or small businessmen and women. You take the amount of income you've got and you prioritize your spending and you live within your means. That means you have to make tough choices. That means you can't fund everything you'd like to fund. But we prioritize 2 areas, education and health care. We agreed with Governor Scott, for example, that on the education side, we wanted to try and get $1 billion extra into K-12 education, and we did that. And I want to compliment the leadership of our Appropriations Chairman in the House, Denise Grimsley. We met that goal. Now that means you had to make cuts in other areas, even including within the education budget. But K-12 education is sort of the foundation of education in our state. We met that goal. On the healthcare side, we agreed with Governor Scott that we could make some savings and be more efficient in how we reimburse hospitals and other providers in Medicaid. The governor recommended an approach he called banding, which I think has some good intellectual foundation for it. We suggested an alternative approach to reach the same goal, which is emulate some of the methods they use in Medicare and that are as part of the state's Medicaid reform plan. But again, that's how the process works. Everybody agrees generally on a goal, or it's best if they do, and in this case we do with the governor, and then they may work together to suggest ideas to get there. So I'm pretty optimistic that we're on a decent path to get everything done on time.
Let's talk about another issue that kind of popped up along with redistricting and budgeting, and that's gambling.
Oh, yes.
First question, with regard to destination resort / casino gambling. Is the casino gambling destination resort legislation really dead?
Yes, it's absolutely dead. And I want to say a word of compliment to Representative Eric Fresen, the sponsor of that bill in the House. That was a complex issue, heavily lobbied, both for and against, and I thought he did a real yeoman's job of presenting the case and making that pitch. In a democracy, though, and in a representative democracy, that's what the committee process is for, and he realized in the first committee of reference, which was the last committee meeting for the session, that he didn't have the votes. They TP'd the bill, and it's not going to come back this session. I think what may come back this session, or what's still out there, are other gaming issues. There's always, it seems that this session, there's been just a myriad of gaming issues beyond the normal tweaks that get suggested. You've got the Gretna, the barrel racing. You've got we had the casino destination resort issue. You've got the internet cafes, and I don't know if you'd like me to comment on that.
Yes, I would, because it's still alive as an issue, correct? Very
much so. It's rare that the governor and the entire cabinet agree very publicly on something, and one of the things they've identified is that they think the internet cafes are and ought to be clearly illegal. In the House, I think there's a large number of members who feel the exact same way, and so I think that issue is very much alive. Obviously, you never know till the end of session how things will shake out, but I think there's a pretty strong call for action on that by the governor and the cabinet, and I think the House feels the same way. Obviously, we'd have to see what the Senate says about that, because it takes 2 to tango in the bicameral legislature, but I think there's a pretty strong appetite for that from literally the governor on down, and I think that issue is very much alive.
With regard to that issue, do you think the movement is toward banning the internet cafes or regulating them?
Clearly from the governor and cabinet, it's towards banning them outright. The folks who do operate internet cafes, and part of the reason there's such, I think, a desire to move on this is they're proliferating like crazy. I mean, they're popping up all over the state. Just in Tallahassee, you can drive around and they're everywhere, it seems. And so I think there's a strong appetite to do something about them. The problem with regulating them is folks say that would then violate the Indian Gaming Compact, and the state would lose almost $250 million a year in revenue if they simply regulate them, whereas if they were to be banned, it would not disrupt that. That's the argument. And I don't comment on the particulars of member bills, but I think if one had to speculate about if action is taken, which would it be, I think it would more favor the banning side than the regulating side.
Another issue that has gained quite a bit of attention is prison privatization. The whole issue of privatization has been discussed over several years, but as a cost-saving method, I know that it has been considered important by some of the leadership in the Senate, but it attracted kind of at the last minute on the floor during part of the session in the Senate some opposition from some senators who have prisons in their districts and from the PBA, who represents correctional officers. And I was going to just take the temperature of the House through you. What say you about prison privatization and the appetite for it in the House?
I think there's a strong appetite for it in the House. And it's privatization is it's one tool in the toolbox of getting either the same results for less money or better results for the same money in our criminal justice system. It's not a panacea. We also need to look at some of the other policy changes, and wonderfully in Florida we've seen an actual decline in the prison population. I think the governor recommended actually closing some prisons earlier this year because the prison population is down, and that's a good thing. But so is our budget. So we always have a duty to the taxpayers to get the best value we can. And I think privatization absolutely plays a role in that, and I expect that to move forward in the House too.
Are you going to miss being Mr. Speaker?
I'm sure I will. Right now I'm so busy in the session that I haven't had time to think about it, but I'm sure I will. It has been the greatest honor, probably one of the greatest honors of my life, to get to be Speaker of the House. And I love the House as an institution, and I know I will, but I also feel really good about the hands that I'm leaving it to. The next Speaker, Will Weatherford's going to do a great job, and I'm sure I'll miss it, but I'll also feel good like I got the maximum I could out of the experience and hopefully made a positive difference, and we'll see when we're done.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You're welcome, Steve.